Before we begin today's episode, take a quiet moment to settle in. Let your breathing slow. Let the noise of the day soften and fade. If you are listening right now, you are welcome to share where you are listening from. A country, a city, or a quiet place where the world feels distant and still. Tonight's story is about belief. Not belief inherited, not belief enforced, but belief chosen. It is the story of a man who questioned traditions older than memory itself. A ruler who looked at the gods of his ancestors and turned away, and in doing so, reshaped the spiritual foundation of ancient Egypt. This is the story of Akhenaten. Long before Akhenaten ruled Egypt, the land was governed by balance. This balance was known as Ma'at. Ma'at was not written law. It was not a rule carved into stone. It was the natural order of the universe. Ma'at was truth. Ma'at was justice. Ma'at was harmony between gods, people, and the natural world. The Nile flooded when Ma'at was upheld. Crops grew in their season. The sun rose and set in its proper rhythm. When Ma'at was disturbed, chaos followed. To live in ancient Egypt was to live within this balance. Religion shaped every aspect of daily life. The gods were not distant or abstract ideas. They were present everywhere, in the river, the sky, the soil, and the air. There were many gods, each responsible for a different part of existence. Amun was the hidden god, unseen but immensely powerful. Ra crossed the sky each day in his solar boat, bringing light to the world. Osiris ruled the afterlife, judging the souls of the dead. Isis protected families and healed the sick. Horus embodied kingship itself, the divine protector of the throne. Temples lined the banks of the Nile, from the delta in the north to Nubia in the south. Priests performed rituals at dawn and dusk, without interruption. Offerings of bread, beer, incense, and prayer were made daily. Religion was not a private matter. It was social structure. It was economy. It was identity. At the center of this system stood the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was not simply a ruler. He was divine by nature. The living embodiment of Horus on earth, the guardian of Ma'at. If Egypt prospered, the Pharaoh ruled well. If famine struck or enemies advanced, the Pharaoh had failed to maintain balance. This system had endured for centuries. It had survived invasions, droughts, and dynastic change. It felt permanent, unquestionable. Into this ancient and stable world was born a prince named Amenhotep. He was the son of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and Queen Nefertiti. His father ruled during one of the most prosperous periods in Egyptian history. Gold flowed into Egypt from Nubia. Foreign rulers sent tribute and gifts. Monuments rose across the land, celebrating stability and power. Amenhotep III ruled confidently. His reign was marked by luxury rather than conflict. Egypt's borders were secure. Its temples were rich. Queen Nefertiti was an extraordinary figure. Though not born into royalty, she ruled beside the king as an equal. She advised him. She appeared prominently in royal art. She communicated directly with foreign rulers. Amenhotep grew up in a court shaped by her influence. As a young prince, he was educated in ritual, theology, and kingship. He learned the names of the gods. He learned the responsibilities of ruling. He learned how Egypt had always been governed. There is no record of rebellion in his youth. No sign that he questioned the ancient order. When Amenhotep III died, the prince ascended the throne as Amenhotep IV. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He performed traditional rituals. He honored the gods. He ruled as expected. Egypt continued as it always had. But beneath the surface, something was quietly changing. Amenhotep IV began to show a growing interest in the sun, not as a god among many, but as something more. Not Ra, not Amun-Ra, but Aten. At first, this change was subtle, almost invisible, but it marked the beginning of a shift that would alter Egypt forever. Amenhotep IV's interest in Aten did not announce itself with force. It unfolded quietly. At first, Aten existed comfortably alongside Egypt's traditional gods. There were still rituals to Amun, still offerings to Ra, Osiris, and Isis, still festivals and processions that followed ancient custom. To most observers, nothing seemed out of place, but subtle changes were taking shape within the royal court. Amenhotep IV began commissioning hymns that praised Aten in unfamiliar ways. These hymns spoke of Aten not as a local deity or divine personality, but as the universal source of all life. Aten was described as the creator of humans and animals alike, as the force that caused plants to grow and birds to fly, as the light that reached every land, not only Egypt. This language was new. Egyptian gods traditionally ruled specific realms. Aten ruled existence itself. As these ideas spread, Aten's presence in official inscriptions increased. Other gods appeared less frequently. Their names grew smaller, less central. The shift was gradual but deliberate. Then came the moment that made Akhenaten's direction unmistakable. Amenhotep IV changed his name. He became Akhenaten, the one who is effective for Aten. In ancient Egypt, a name was not simply a label. It carried identity, purpose, and destiny. To change one's name was to reshape the self. By adopting this new name, Akhenaten declared his loyalty openly. His devotion was no longer divided. It belonged to Aten alone. This moment marked the beginning of Egypt's most radical religious transformation. After the name change, Akhenaten's actions grew bolder. The worship of Aten was no longer secondary. It became central. Temples dedicated to Aten were expanded. New monuments were built in prominent locations. Hymns to Aten were inscribed on walls where other gods had once been praised. More importantly, Akhenaten began reducing the authority of Egypt's most powerful religious institutions. The temples of Amun were targeted. For centuries, the priesthood of Amun had held immense power. They controlled vast lands, employed thousands of workers, and influenced royal policy. Their wealth rivaled that of the crown itself. Akhenaten's reforms threatened this structure directly. Temples were closed, offerings redirected. The name of Amun was erased from inscriptions. In some cases, even the word gods was removed and replaced with God. This was not a symbolic shift. It was deliberate suppression. The new religion of Aten was radically simple. There were no myths, no stories of divine conflict, no gods marrying, dying, or battling chaos. Aten was light. It rose each morning. It warmed the land. It sustained life. Aten did not speak through priests. There were no intermediaries, no hidden sanctuaries. Akhenaten and his family worshipped Aten directly. In art, the sun disk appears above the royal family. Rays of sunlight stretch downward. Each ray ends in a small hand, offering the symbol of life. These hands reach only toward Akhenaten and his household. This detail is important. It suggests that the royal family alone stood between Aten and the people. They were not simply rulers. They were the sole bridge between the divine and the human world. Religion became centralized in a way Egypt had never experienced before. As belief changed, the image of kingship began to change as well. Akhenaten no longer presented himself as a distant, idealized ruler. He appeared increasingly human. His representations in art shifted noticeably. His body was shown with elongated limbs. His face softened. His posture appeared relaxed, almost contemplative. This departure from tradition was intentional. Akhenaten was redefining what it meant to be king. The pharaoh was no longer simply the embodiment of timeless perfection. He was the chosen servant of Aten. This new identity unsettled many. Egyptian society was built on continuity. Change was expected to be slow and controlled. Akhenaten's reforms moved faster than tradition could absorb, yet he continued forward. The sun rose each day, Aten shone, and Akhenaten followed. But even as his devotion deepened, Akhenaten began to see a problem. Egypt's ancient religious centers were saturated with memory. Thebes was filled with temples to Amun. Memphis carried centuries of tradition. To fully commit to Aten, Akhenaten needed distance, a place untouched by old gods, a place where the sun could reign alone. This realization would lead to the most dramatic decision of his reign: the abandonment of Egypt's ancient capitals and the creation of an entirely new city. The decision to leave Egypt's ancient capitals marked a turning point in Akhenaten's reign. Thebes and Memphis were not simply cities. They were living records of Egypt's past. Every street, every temple, every wall carried the names of ancient gods. For Akhenaten, these places could no longer support his vision. If Aten was to stand alone, Egypt needed a new beginning. And beside Akhenaten, fully visible in this belief, stood Nefertiti. Nefertiti was not a passive presence in Akhenaten's rule. From the earliest years of his reign, she appears prominently in royal art. She stands beside the king in nearly every ceremonial scene. She wears crowns normally reserved for pharaohs. She performs rituals traditionally performed by kings. This was unprecedented. In some reliefs, Nefertiti is shown striking enemies of Egypt with a raised weapon. This act symbolized royal authority and divine protection. To assign it to a queen was extraordinary. Her image was not smaller than Akhenaten's. She was not placed behind him. She stood at his scale. This was not decoration. It was a statement. Nefertiti's name appears inside cartouches, the oval frames that enclosed royal names. This honor was usually reserved for kings alone. Many scholars believe this indicates that Nefertiti ruled as co-regent alongside Akhenaten. Others suggest she may have ruled independently for a short time. The records are incomplete, but the message in the art is clear. Power was shared. Together, Akhenaten and Nefertiti presented themselves as the chosen family of Aten. Religion no longer revolved around temples or priests. It revolved around a household. The royal family appeared beneath the sun disk. Rays of light stretched downward, ending in hands that offered life. These hands touched Akhenaten. They touched Nefertiti. They touched their daughters. No one else. This imagery was deliberate. It suggested that the royal family alone stood between Aten and the people. They were not simply rulers. They were the living channel of divine light. As belief shifted, Egyptian art underwent a dramatic transformation. For centuries, royal art had followed strict conventions. Bodies were idealized, faces timeless, movement restrained. Under Akhenaten, these rules were abandoned. Figures became elongated, faces softened, bellies rounded, limbs stretched. Akhenaten's appearance was unlike any previous pharaoh. Some scholars have suggested physical explanations. Others see symbolism, a body shaped by divine uniqueness. What matters most is intent. Akhenaten wanted to be seen differently. Royal scenes now showed affection. Akhenaten lifting his daughters into his arms, Nefertiti touching his face gently, children playing beneath the sun. This intimacy was revolutionary. Never before had a pharaoh been shown as a father. Never before had the royal family appeared so openly human. The divine had moved closer to daily life. With belief and art transformed, Akhenaten made his boldest decision. He chose a stretch of desert land along the Nile, a place with no major religious history, a place untouched by old temples. There, he ordered the construction of a new capital. Its name was Akhenaten, the horizon of Aten. Boundary markers were carved into the cliffs surrounding the site. They declared that this land belonged to Aten alone, that no other god would be honored there. Akhenaten believed this location was chosen by divine will. The cliffs opened toward the rising sun, forming a natural gateway of light. Akhenaten rose quickly. Palaces were built. Temples stood open to the sky. Homes for officials, artists, and workers spread across the plain. Everything faced the sun. Temples had no roofs. Altars were exposed. Sunlight touched every ritual. This architecture reflected belief. Aten required no mystery, only visibility. For a time, Akhenaten flourished. Artists experimented freely. Sculptors carved with realism. Painters explored movement and emotion. The city became the heart of Akhenaten's world. But beyond its sunlit walls, Egypt was beginning to strain. And the balance that had once defined the land was quietly slipping away. For a brief time, Akhenaten appeared to fulfill Akhenaten's vision. The city was alive with purpose. Palaces reflected sunlight. Temples stood open beneath the sky. Officials, artists, and workers moved through streets built for a new belief. Within the royal precinct, daily life unfolded beneath the ever-present sun disk. Akhenaten performed rituals directly to Aten. Offerings were made in open courtyards. There were no dark sanctuaries, no hidden chambers. Light touched everything. But Akhenaten was fragile. Unlike ancient cities shaped by centuries of tradition, this city existed only because Akhenaten willed it into being. It had no ancestral roots, no established institutions beyond the king himself. And slowly, signs of strain began to appear. Beyond the city's walls, Egypt's empire was weakening. Foreign territories that had once acknowledged Egyptian authority grew restless. Alliances required attention. Military support was expected. Letters arrived from distant rulers begging for help. These letters survive today as the Amarna letters. They speak of unrest, of enemies advancing, of cities under threat. Again and again, rulers pleaded for Egyptian intervention. Again and again, no armies came. Akhenaten's attention remained fixed on belief. The maintenance of empire required compromise and force. Akhenaten offered neither. Inside Egypt, tension grew quietly. The closure of traditional temples had far-reaching consequences. Temples were not only religious centers, they were economic engines. They employed workers, distributed food, supported entire communities. When these temples closed, livelihoods collapsed. Priests lost authority. Artisans lost work. Local economies suffered. Many people accepted Aten publicly, while privately continuing to honor the old gods within their homes. Faith is difficult to erase. The ancient sense of ma'at, balance, felt disturbed. To many Egyptians, this imbalance was deeply troubling. As the years passed, Akhenaten itself began to change. Construction slowed. Some buildings were left unfinished. Maintenance declined. The city that once symbolized renewal began to feel hollow, and at the center of Akhenaten's world, uncertainty grew. It was during this period that Nefertiti vanished from the historical record. Her image, once everywhere, faded from monuments. Her name stopped appearing in inscriptions. No announcement marked her disappearance. No clear explanation survives. Some scholars believe she died suddenly, possibly from illness or plague. Others suggest she fell out of favor. Another theory proposes that she changed her identity and ruled briefly under another name. The truth remains unknown. What is certain is that her absence weakened the image of unity at the heart of Akhenaten's rule. The partnership that had defined the Aten religion fractured. Akhenaten continued his devotion with unwavering focus. He did not reverse course. He did not compromise. Even as instability grew, his belief remained absolute. But belief alone could not sustain Egypt. After approximately 17 years on the throne, Akhenaten died. There is no detailed account of his final days, no grand inscriptions marking his death. He simply disappears from the record. His burial, if it took place at Akhenaten, was later abandoned. With his death, the experiment lost its anchor. Egypt moved quickly. A child ascended the throne. His name was Tutankhaten. Soon it was changed to Tutankhamun. Aten was removed. Amun returned. Temples were reopened. The old gods reclaimed their place. The capital was moved away from Akhenaten. The city was abandoned to the desert. Palaces emptied. Temples fell silent. The sand began to reclaim the streets. But Egypt did not simply move on. It erased. Akhenaten's name was removed from official king lists. His monuments were destroyed or reused. His memory was deliberately obscured. This was not revenge, it was survival. In ancient Egypt, memory was power. To remember was to preserve. To forget was to destroy. Akhenaten's beliefs threatened the foundation of Egyptian identity. To restore Ma'at, he had to vanish. Centuries passed. Then archaeology uncovered Amarna. Homes, letters, art. A forgotten king returned. Not as a villain, not as a hero, but as a man who believed deeply. As this story comes to a close, imagine the desert at twilight. The ruins of Akhenaten lie silent beneath the sand. The sun lowers behind the cliffs. Shadows stretch across empty streets. Akhenaten believed truth came from light. History answered with shadow. Yet for a moment, the world changed. And that moment still matters. Silent history continues quietly.